you, Mars. Let me come back and cook your little Rudy Poo candy ass because you a little jabroni too. Once again, you talk all this shit about Allen Iverson. First of all, Chilltown was wrong. That Indiana Pacers team was a great team. That Indiana Pacers team was a competitor team all the way from the mid-'90s all the way up into that 2000 era run when they went to the NBA Finals and faced Kobe and Shaq. In fact, they were picked to beat the Chicago Bulls. I think it was in 97 and 98 in the playoffs. Am I lying, Chilltown? The Bulls got through, won that series. They were picked to win that team. Reggie Miller was still on that team. And then they still reloaded. They reloaded and bought Jermaine O'Neal over there eventually. They bought Jalen Rose over there. That team was still loaded. They were good enough to go to the NBA Finals. And they gave Kobe and Shaq a run for their money. Even though Kobe did get hurt, came back and helped close that deal. Now, let's keep going. Also, in the Eastern Conference, you underplayed Big Dog Glenn Robinson, Sam Cassell, Ray Allen in their prime. Jesus Shuttlesworth was a monster. Sam Cassell, hold on. Because I'm DJ Khaled right now. I'm going to keep going, right? So those three guys, along with Tim Thomas, along with Darvin Ham, along with Michael Redd, along with all them other dudes they have on the bench, that Milwaukee Bucks team was loaded. They were the team that was picked to go to the NBA Finals. If I'm lying, I'm flying. Am I lying, Chilltown? No, I ain't lying. Let the church preach. AI went through those guys. He went to a Game 7 and went through those guys, and that was not an easy series to win. That's a damn fact. And I forget who their big man was, too. They had Irvin Johnson as their big man. That team was loaded, bro. So to cut the crap, fool. Now, let's go to the other team. Let's go to the team he lost to. That Toronto Raptors team was a very good team, too. That Toronto Raptors team was winning 50-plus games. Vince Carter was a monster. Vince Carter in Toronto with the Raptors, those early years he was playing in the Raptors, when they battled AI in the playoffs, they were a great defensive team, and those teams were very good teams. Because guess what?
Ron,
hold on, Ron. How many teams? Hold on, Ron. The year they played AI in them, how many games Vince Carter won that year? How many
47,
games?
47.
Come on. Absolutely. Hold on. Absolutely right. Now,
they were never a 50-win team.
Hold on,
They were never a 50-win team.
Hold on, low. I ain't finished yet. Let me finish.
That's what you said.
Let me finish.
Oh my
God.
On
that team, Vince Carter was averaging what that year, Low?
27.
Big Dog Antonio Davis was averaging what?
13, 14.
How many rebounds?
10.
And who else was scoring? Who else was on that team that averaging double figures?
Nobody else.
I'm saying who was Oak on that team too?
Oakley was. If I round up for him, he can
get
to 10.
Hold on. So the only two scorers on that team was Vince and
Antonio Davis. If I round up, for Oakley, I can, and that'll be 10.
Okay, so that hold on. So that's an even comparison because you take what AI was averaging, and his next score was Aaron McKee, averaging 12. Cut it out. So once again, hold on. Let me keep going because you act like he just had cakewalks to walk through. Vince Carter at that time was one of the premier players in the NBA. Am I right or wrong, Chilltown? Let's keep going. Who else was in the East? At that time, who else was in the East at that time, Chilltown? It was also
let's see, Milwaukee.
Toronto, Indiana,
Charlotte,
guys.
Indiana,
that trash ass conference, man. That's a trash conference. I don't know why
y'all.
It's
true, Low. You lying, Low, because it's not trash. For you to say it's trash,
that was a trash conference.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Hold on.
I hate hearing that. That's dumb.
I got my man Fluent in here, and I need to hear from Fluent on two things. First off, I need to know if the Eastern Conference during this time was trash. Yes or no in 2001. Just around that time. Around that
time. Yeah, from 2000 to 2005. Was that a good conference?
In the early 2000s, comparatively to the 90s and the 2010s, the entire NBA wasn't as good as it is. So in context, they were. It wasn't a great, but it wasn't horrible. It wasn't like a cakewalk.
No, let Low tell it. They were garbage. The Eastern Conference was garbage. If you let Low tell it, it wasn't.
It was not garbage. If you're comparing it to other eras, it wasn't strong.
So what am I supposed to compare it to?
In its time, it wasn't that far off. Like the West was better, but it wasn't like a big gap like there was in the 2010s.
But if you let Low tell it, it's just straight garbage. It was nothing but trash, straight trash.
It was all trash. Is that what you were?
That's exactly what you walked into, Tone. The Eastern Conference was garbage. That's what you just walked into.
No.
Straight garbage.
No.
And James Harden, they said James Harden. Fluent.
I don't know what you're
hold up right quick, Ticket. Let me answer this.
Yeah, I just want to say I don't know what you're comparing it to, but you got to remember the early 2000s was like the lowest scoring era that we'd seen since the shot clock.
Thank you, Fluent. Hold on, Fluent. I want you to answer this, Fluent.
I did hear this part. You were talking about the Raptors, for example. Carter was averaging over 27 points. He did have Antonio Davis averaging, I think, 13 or 14. And yes, there wasn't anybody else or double digits, but he did have 4 other guys averaging 9, 9.3, 9.5, 9.8. That was actually a very balanced roster. Was it a great team? No, but 47 wins in an era that was very defensive-minded, low scoring, to have 7 guys in 9 points or more in that era, well, they were scoring 90 points a game. So yeah, pretty good.
Now, Fluent, hold on. Get to the real. Hold on,
But if you let Low tell it, now we in an era. Now we're in an era. If you move forward a little bit with James Harden, we're in an era where the whistle blows a lot more, and these teams are averaging 110, 115 points a game. Not only because they're more skilled, but because the whistle is blowing a little bit more. But if you let Low tell it, back then we were garbage. The Eastern Conference was straight whack.
No, there's a reason. Look, there's a reason in the early 2000s. They made a bunch of rule changes is because offense sells tickets. Offense gets revenue. And they had seen a steady decline from 1990 till 2003, I think. The scoring went down every single year to the point where I believe in 02, 03, whatever it was like 91 per game. It was really low. And they're like, we need to change.
Very defensive oriented.
Yeah, we need to change the way the game is played.
I want you to answer the question.
The funny part is, hold on, I see Low laughing. But dude, there was reports and stuff from the commissioner himself coming out saying, we need to change this and create more offense and make it a more free-flowing, open game like in Europe. That's what they said at that time.
So the question I have for you is do you think that same baloney that Low just said, where he said he thinks James Harden could do the same thing with AI's team that AI did?
Yo, Influent, answer this, and then we got to get into these super chats.
Okay. So could James Harden do what AI did? And I would say no, but it's not because of skill. Because James Harden is a much more efficient scorer than he is. He has all the talent in the world, but we've never seen James Harden step his game up in the playoffs. And so if I'm trusting the leadership of James Harden to the leadership of AI, nah, I ain't taking that bet.
No, I'm saying, I ain't even talking about that. I'm just saying from the level of players that James Harden had, the help he had versus the help AI had, do you think he could have achieved half of what AI achieved throughout those 10 years in Philly? The AI achieved with the talent, the lack of talent the AI played. Do you think James Harden could have did the same thing?
I don't have faith. I'll say the same thing again. I'll answer it the same way. I don't have faith in James Harden in the playoffs. So the answer is going to be no, because he hasn't shown me he can do it.
Birdman put that brother in his
I have the advantage of seeing him not perform in the playoffs. But if you just said talent and skill and I didn't know, yeah, I'd say yeah, he probably could because he's
one last question I got for Fluent because I gotta handle this Mars stuff right quick. Fluent, who is better?
For the record, when you say the teams were horrible in the East, like you're not talking record wise, because record wise they had multiple 50-win teams, 49-win teams. Like
stop lying.
Fluent.
Can we stop lying?
No, just so you know, you do know multiple is more than one, right? You do know that, Low.
How many?
Just so we clear.
I'm about to ask a question.
That's more than one.
I'm about to ask a question. Between 2000 to 2005, how many 60-win teams were in the West?
Between 2000 and 2005, I'd probably say one, maybe.
I'm gonna say
it was one.
Okay.
Between
I was gonna say three.
I was right.
Between that time, how frequent did we see 50-win teams? Because 50
in the Western Conference?
No, in the East.
In the Eastern Conference?
How often? On a year-to-year basis.
You probably have 2 or 3 every year.
Yep.
But again, hold on, understand that is a outcome of having evenly matched teams that were very defensive minded. So when you're playing slow place 90-point, 80-point games, the teams don't typically go on runs. There was no great
slow cook them. Slow cook them. Slow cook them.
The Western Conference is playing in that exact same era.
Correct.
And somehow they can manifest 6 50-win teams. Somehow they can get 2 60-win teams
because
in the
West
season.
There was a very different style of play in the West.
They can still somehow, some way. I mean, there's a year in 2003. There was only one 50-win team.
Right.
Some of these teams that y'all are talking about were average defensive units. Like he just sat there and said about the Milwaukee Bucks. They were an average defensive team when Allen Iverson.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. So how many teams in the East were giving up over 100 points per game in that same era?
Nobody was giving up 100 points.
That's the point, then, Lo.
In the West,
no.
Teams.
That's the point, Lo.
It was a different style, which allows for teams fast-paced to win regular season games.
And your logic that they're playing in the same conference, and they're not the same conference. They're playing in the same league. Is it your suggestion that the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference played the same as the New York Knicks? Is that what you're telling me? You're telling me that they play with that same pace and that same speed? Are you telling me that?
Let me ask you this. How many teams do you think were allowing 100 points back then? In the league as a whole,
there was probably 2 or 3, and they were always in the West.
So you're telling me those 2 to 3 teams in the Western Conference tips the scale so much so that you think it's an accurate depiction to claim that Western Conference teams, the 15 teams in the West, there's so many 100-point games that are being scored in the West because of 2 teams?
So why is it so if that's the case,
but we've admitted that the West was better, but the East wasn't trash.
Which is the point. Which is the point right there, Lo.
Just because one thing is better doesn't make just because you like Coke better, it doesn't make Pepsi shit.
Garbage. That's the point right there, Lo.
It's just I like Coke better.
That's what we were dealing with. That was the point that we were dealing with right from the beginning. When you and I first had this conversation. Now, I never said that the West wasn't better. What I'm not trying to hear from you is that the Eastern Conference was garbage. That's not true.
I am comparing it throughout 20 years before and 20 years after. It is unequivocally true.
20 years before and 20 years after.
I'm about to, if you go from 1980 up until 2020, it is unequivocally true
that the East has been worse than the West. Absolutely.
No. It is unequivocally true. The 5-year stretch in the early 2000s in the Eastern Conference is the worst 5-year stretch from the early 80s, and that's East and West.
Worst by what?
The standard in which it took to be a playoff team. How many 50-win teams are in the conference?
You're saying 2005. Hold on. You're saying 2005 was worse than the first 5 years of the 80s where sub 500 teams were making the playoffs every year?
Like the San Antonio Spurs, who was 6 games under 500.
You heard one thing that I said. I also then followed up by acknowledging yes, back at that time, yes, the standard in which to make the playoffs was a bit lower because it was 16 teams making the playoffs, but there was only 22 teams in the conference, right? However, the top of the conference was still so much better than everything else that it makes sense, right? So even though, yes, the standard to make the playoffs was much lower in the 80s, but the standard to be a number 1, number 2, number 3 seed was also much higher because you had to win 55 to 60 games every single year to be at that point. In 2003, you can be the number 1 seed in the East with flat out 50 wins, and they were the only 50-win team in an entire conference. I'm looking at not only that, how many All-NBA selections you're receiving.
In 03?
In 03 or 02, one of the two.
Yeah, but it's not 03 because 03 had a 60-win team, a 50-win team, so it wasn't 03.
So 02.
03?
In 02, which one is it? Yeah, in 02, 03.
Okay,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
02,
this is the problem with statistics, okay? Yes, you had one 50-win team, but you also had a 49-win team, 2 48-win teams, a 47-win team. So they're 1 or 2 games off. Like to say that, well, they didn't win 50. Okay, 48, 49. What's the difference?
The difference.
Like you're trying to make a point. I get it. But if I win 49 games and you're saying I'm shit because I didn't win 50, come on.
If you all let me finish, I'll get.
Go ahead, Lo. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Again.
Lo,
It's not just the record. It's also how many players are making All-NBA teams, how many players are winning MVPs and finishing top in the MVP race. How many of these players are how many teams are finishing below or above offensive and defensive rating? If you take all of that into account, everything, it is undeniable that there were more below average offensive and defensive teams in the Eastern Conference than in that 5-year stretch than in any other point in the 20 years before or after. It is undeniable the amount of players that were making all NBA teams and winning MVPs and finishing in the top 5 in the MVP race. It is undeniable that majority of them were Western Conference players. It is undeniable that when it comes to the standard of winning and averages of what they were able to produce and the standard to get into the playoffs and the standard to make the number 1 seed, it's undeniable that it's lower. All of that was lower.
Does that make it? But does that make it trash?
Yes.
No.
Okay. So no. Fluent. Fluent. Let him say it's trash. That means he had to say it was trash all those years LeBron James played against all those teams.
I said that as well. I said that as well.
It's the player choice way. Yeah, them boys don't get it started. The player choice way. Yeah, the player choice way. Come and switch lanes into the player choice way.